People who have genuinely ruined their lives. What's your story? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and comment something related to the topic. Let's begin. Story 1. I was drinking heavily, and my wife was cheating on me. I left her, which meant leaving our apartment. When I tried to check into a motel, I discovered she had cleaned out the bank account and maxed out all the credit cards. I ended up sleeping in my office. The next day, she showed up at work. We worked together, and it quickly became clear we couldn't continue working in the same place. Everyone at work seemed to take her side, so I quit my job. I had no car and almost nothing left. I went down to a homeless encampment and introduced myself, but they thought I was a police informant. I spent that night terrified they'd kill me if I fell asleep. After that, I started sleeping in the library during the day and scavenging for food. I stayed awake all night. I stole ketchup packets and saltine crackers from a Wendy's so I could eat for a weekend. I sold my plasma for cash. I got 3 days worth of emergency food stamps, but I had earned too much before to qualify for more. After 6 weeks, I completely lost touch with reality. I couldn't tell dreams from real life. Someone I barely knew heard I was homeless and let me sleep in his living room recliner and share his food. I began to recover. For months later, I found a job, moved to another town, and started the long road back to having a life. Now, I've been married for almost 30 years, have 4 kids, and am approaching retirement in a comfortable home with plenty to eat. Story 2. I watched my best friend ruin his life and ultimately die as a consequence of his own actions. In our early 20s, my friend group and I loved to get high and party. At first, it was fine. We all lived with our parents, went to local universities or community colleges, and held part or full-time jobs. Over time, though, weed and party drugs gave way to opioids. This was between 2007 and 2010, when they were still easy to get and not yet laced with fentanyl. Things like Percocet, morphine, and Oxycontin. During that phase, my best friend, who I'd known my whole life, found what we called a dirty doctor, someone willing to prescribe him just about anything he wanted in unlimited quantities for cash under the table. For about a year, it was wild. We had benzos, stimulants, and opioids of crazy purity for super cheap. For me, the fun stopped when I got serious about getting into a master's program. I started spending more time on campus doing research and less time hanging out. My friend never really moved on. Instead of transferring from community college to a university, he slowly dropped out, first cutting back to part-time, then not going at all. He also cut back his work hours, choosing instead to stay home all day, high as a kite, and sell pills to an ever-growing list of random people and addicts. A few years passed like that. I still used morphine occasionally, but my tolerance dropped and the bad side effects started to outweigh the good. So I quit. My friend, though, became fully addicted. His entire life revolved around getting, taking, and selling pills. Eventually, I went on to pursue a PhD after finishing my master's and moved away. I barely talked to him anymore, aside from the occasional phone call, even though I still cared about him deeply. A couple of years later, he reached out to tell me his mom was terminally ill and only had a few months left to live. But instead of focusing on her, he started panicking about losing his health insurance. His mom was a business owner and had managed to keep him covered under her plan, and worried he wouldn't be able to get his meds anymore. A few months later, after his mom's funeral and several failed attempts to reach him, he called me from a random number. We talked for about an hour. He told me his family had forged his mom's signature on her deathbed to keep him from inheriting her house. They knew about his addiction, it was obvious, and had sold the house to cover her medical bills, leaving him homeless. Without insurance, without a home, and with a raging opioid addiction cut off at the source, he ended up living in his car, buying, selling, and using heroin. When he told me everything, I tried to help. I couldn't support him financially. I was in grad school, but I found him a rehab program with full medical detox at no cost. He thanked me for the info and said he'd think about it, but he wasn't ready to quit. That was the last time we spoke. For months later, I found out he'd been found dead outside a convenience store from drug-related complications. Not an overdose, but organ failure after years of abuse and neglecting his health. It was such a terrible end for someone who wasn't a bad person. He just lost his way and was too stubborn to admit he was in over his head until it was too late. Story 3. Not forcing myself to stop working while I was pregnant. I was having preterm labor scares every week, spent multiple stays in the hospital, and already had a high-risk pregnancy because of my age. My son was stillborn 10 days before my due date. Less than a year later, we lost our apartment, most of our belongings, and our pets due to eviction. We had fallen too far behind on rent and couldn't catch up. I lost everything trying to save a baby who died anyway. It feels unbearably awful. I cry a lot. I have PTSD, and I can't sleep. I haven't slept since Friday, even with medication. Most days, I manage okay mentally, but some days are really, really bad. Edit. Thanks, everyone. I still have bad days. My fiancé and our 11-year-old do too. Our kid gets us through a lot. He's an amazingly good child. It's hard, though. Sometimes I open Facebook and see pictures of the cats we lost. I know they're in good homes, but it still hurts. I lost my mom's ashes during the semi-illegal eviction, but we were able to recover our son's ashes and the baby things we had packed away after losing him. It's been a terrible time, a terrible year, but things are slowly getting a little better for us. Story 4. As a teenager, I moved around a lot and didn't have any confidence. I kind of created my own little world and always looked for the easiest way to get by. I argued and disagreed with my mom and stepdad constantly, and I never felt comfortable at home. After high school, I was sort of pushed into studying nursing, something I had no passion for, just because it was supposed to lead to a stable job. I started smoking a lot of weed and skipping classes. I was an awkward loner, listening to my classmates talk about their weekend hookups and wondering what was wrong with me. So I kept withdrawing more and more until eventually I gave up altogether and ended up homeless, wandering around for years. It's been an on and off thing for the last decade. I managed to get myself into a decent position, a job, a place to stay, but usually, after about a year, I lose it. I miss shifts because of drinking or lack of motivation, and before long, I withdraw again and find myself homeless, isolated, and wandering, just like I am right now. Story 5. Not me, but a former friend. C got divorced, and since she had been a stay-at-home wife, her ex-husband gave her a lot in the settlement. About 80% of the home sale, which came to around $250,000, with no debt, plus $2,000 a month in alimony. Within a year, she was broke, deep in debt, and spending her alimony the moment it hit her account. How did that happen? She went on expensive retreats, stopped taking her bipolar medication, threw money at quick-fix cures, bought new furniture and clothes, and spent a ton on Botox and fillers. There's more, but I don't talk to her anymore. Edit. Didn't expect this to blow up. A lot of people are saying she needs support. She had access to her medication. She just chose not to take it. I don't know why. She gave me multiple excuses, none of which made sense, and her ex told me this was a pattern during their marriage. The only reason I found out she had stopped taking her meds and seeing her therapist was because she eventually admitted she'd been lying to me about it for months, only after being backed into a corner. She went to stenography school and lived with a friend who was a teaching assistant there. Later, C told me her friend suddenly wanted her out within 3 months for no reason. I later found out that C had trashed the place, slacked off in school, and threw tantrums whenever confronted. It all came to a head when she acted like she was going to hit her friend, who was also the TA. Around that same time, she dropped out of school, refused to get any kind of education, and started an online business. That business was basically an excuse to hoard crystals, call vacations business trips, and keep spending money on Botox and fillers. When I asked how she could afford all that, she said her business was doing great. It wasn't. I even asked her to move into my apartment building because the rent here is relatively cheap. She refused, saying it was ghetto. It's not. I can literally see the Hollywood sign from my window. Instead, she chose to live in a luxury apartment and claimed she got some special sublet deal. That was a lie. The rent was $2,000 a month, her entire alimony check. She half-heartedly sold crystals, tarot cards, and meditation classes, but of course, that didn't pay the bills. I begged her to start applying for real jobs, especially after she started harassing her ex-husband and his new girlfriend, claiming he owed her money. He didn't. She said she'd signed up for job training and would start working soon. That was another lie. She burned through her $250,000 down to just $13,000 in 9 months, then said she got scammed in a tax scheme. I tried to be sympathetic, But of course, that turned out to be another lie. She blew the last of her money on shopping and some get-rich-quick investment that turned out to be an obvious scam. Whenever I confronted her or asked for details, she'd start screaming or pick fights. I'd remind her that this behavior was embarrassing for people our age. I'm pushing 40, and she's in her mid-50s. She'd start crying and say she was going through a lot. Normally, I might have had more patience, except I was battling cancer at the time. Yes, she was acting like this while I was literally fighting for my life. Eventually, she moved back in with her ex-husband because he felt sorry for her. He only let her stay if she went to therapy and stayed on her meds. Her therapist tried to help her take accountability, but she broke down crying and blamed her ex for everything, even though they hadn't spoken in ages. She also has a social worker now, but she doesn't listen to them either. I get that people want to be compassionate, but no one owes you support or a relationship, especially when you've been a habitual liar and abuser. C has had every opportunity, for over 50 years, to change her life. She just refuses to take any responsibility. Story 6. I lived on the 3rd floor of a converted house. My neighbors below me were Carla and Jake, and when I moved in, they had just had a baby girl. Jake was a shift manager at a well-known fast food chain and also did fencing with his dad. They weren't rich, but he was earning decent money. He had a stable home, a good landlord, a steady job, a kind and attractive partner, a daughter who depended on him, and a solid social life. Then Jake started drinking heavily. I'd hear arguments late at night, shouting, crying, doors slamming. Their baby would be wailing at 2 in the morning while they fought. Sometimes Jake would be gone for days, and when he finally came home drunk, Carla would have locked the door. He'd bang on it until everyone was awake, the baby, the dogs, the neighbors, and then try to crawl into bed with her. Eventually, he lost his manager job because he stopped showing up, but instead of telling Carla or his parents, he pretended everything was fine. Every morning, he'd go to work, but in reality, he was sitting around drinking all day with the local street crowd. Before long, he stopped helping his dad with fencing, had zero income, and left Carla to handle everything. Childcare, bills, groceries, all of it. I heard he tried to apply for government benefits, but kept missing appointments because he'd start drinking beforehand. The final straw came when he cheated on Carla while drunk with one of her mom's friends. The friend didn't even know who he was until she showed Carla's mom a picture of the younger guy she'd hooked up with. Carla kicked him out for good, but Jake didn't get the message. His mother used to babysit their daughter and still had a set of keys to the flat, which Jake used to make copies. At first, he would just sleep in the hallway outside their apartment. He begged Carla to let him stay during the winter since he had nowhere to go. Their daughter would have to step over her drunk, passed-out father on her way to school. When Carla started seeing someone new, things got worse. She told Jake he wasn't welcome anymore, but he kept showing up. He'd climb onto the balcony outside her bedroom and watch her in bed with other men. Sometimes, he even tried to scare them off. I started getting phone calls from him at 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 a.m., begging me to let him into the building. He would wait by the door when he knew I was getting home from work, trying to guilt me into letting him in. Carla eventually changed the locks, not realizing Jake still had a key to the back entrance. She woke up several times to find him standing over her in bed, watching her sleep. The police were called, and he was arrested. He was released on bail with strict conditions. He couldn't come near our street or contact Carla, but he ignored all of it. He kept turning up, trying to break in, even damaging the new lock on the building's front door. Now, Jake is a homeless alcoholic under investigation for stalking, breaking and entering, criminal damage, harassment, and repeated violations of bail. He has no job, no education, no skills, and no access to his daughter. People have tried to help him, but he doesn't want help, just pity. He's become a manipulative, self-centered drunk who lies to get sympathy and then uses it to take advantage of others. I fell for it the first few times, but now I know better. Story 7. I was an alcoholic for most of my life. For a long time, I was what people call a functional alcoholic. I had a good-paying job, traveled the world for work, and everything seemed fine on the surface. Then my company downsized, I got laid off, and my partner left me. That's when I decided I was done. I'd drink myself to death. I took my severance pay and went all in. One night, after a particularly bad bender, I decided that was it. I got into my car, very drunk, still drinking as I drove, and headed 3 hours away to a friend's house to say goodbye. I broke into her home, crawled into bed next to her, not in a creepy way. I'm also a woman, and we've been lifelong friends, and told her goodbye. She woke up instantly, dragged me to the car, and drove me straight to an emergency mental health clinic. A week later, I was in detox. I spent the next 2 months in a mental health facility. Little by little, day by day, I started to regain control. Then, for the first time in my life, I began to actually feel human, like a whole, real person. I like that feeling. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't being defined by alcohol. I was shaping who I was. I completely changed careers, went back to school, and threw myself into therapy, group sessions, individual therapy, support groups, anywhere people were talking about their feelings. Practicing compassion for others helped me learn how to forgive myself. It's been 6.5 years since my last drink. The forgiveness is still a work in progress, but I'm proud of how far I've come. The whole experience taught me that life is fragile. Hardship, addiction, and mental health struggles can hit anyone, anytime. It's taught me to be kind to others and to myself. Life is messy, complicated, chaotic, and unpredictable. It'll never be perfect, so all we can do is forgive, grow, and accept the imperfections. Story 8. I wouldn't say I completely ruined my life, but I definitely made things much harder than they needed to be. Growing up, I struggled with mental health issues and had zero guidance. My dad was an addict who had divorced my mom, and my mom was severely bipolar. She never even graduated high school, so she had no idea how college worked. She thought I was a genius just because I learned to read early and kept telling me I'd get a full scholarship just for applying. I didn't have anyone to actually guide me or explain how things worked, so I just drifted through life thinking everything would somehow fall into place. By the time I finally started college, it was at a community college, and that's when I learned I couldn't afford to transfer to a university without a cosigner, which I didn't have. To do what I really wanted, I needed to go beyond a bachelor's degree. That dream ended right there. Because of my mental health, lack of discipline, and poor understanding of work ethic, I bounced between several colleges, starting new programs, and dropping out whenever things got too hard or I thought I'd find something better. Now, I'm stuck with $24,000 in debt, no degree, and secondhand embarrassment for how much of a mess I was for years. But I'm older now, more stable, and for the past 3 years, I've been working toward becoming a UX designer. It's still possible, but I picked a tough time to get into tech with all the AI stuff happening. On top of that, I have a family, financial stress, and a full-time job, which makes it even harder to fully apply myself now that I actually want to. Still, I love it, and I'm not giving up. I've quit so many things in my life, but I've been on this path for 3 years now, and I'm not stopping until I make it. Story 9. Straight up nitrous oxide addiction. I'd done my share of other drugs before without any long-term consequences, but this one was different. Before it all went downhill, I had everything going for me. Ivy League undergrad, top 10 law school, and a consulting job at one of the big firms. But I also had undiagnosed depression, anxiety, and ADHD. I'd come home from work at 2 a.m. and go through entire cases, 36 boxes of 10 cartridges each, until it was time to go back to work at 9 a.m. Unsurprisingly, my productivity tanked. The anxiety didn't help either. I'd always been good at testing, but terrible at actually doing the job. Eventually, I took a leave of absence and ended up using full-time. Some days, I'd go through 2 cases, 720 canisters, spending around $150 per case where I lived. The underlying depression made things worse. I spiraled hard, blowing ridiculous amounts of money on mobile gacha games, around $30,000 in 6 months, making impulsive investments during the tail end of the first Bitcoin spike that were basically just gambling, and taking out loans to fund everything. Even though my employer generously continued paying me my full salary during the 6-month leave, I still managed to rack up around $300,000 in debt through my lifestyle and investments. I never got to return to consulting. Since then, I've been bouncing between mediocre jobs, always struggling with performance. The bad economy and bad luck didn't help. My once perfect resume quickly became a liability instead of an asset. That was about 7 years ago. Thankfully, I didn't suffer any permanent physical damage, but for a couple of years, the after effects were awful. hallucinations when I closed my eyes, random pupil dilation, blurry vision, lazy eyes. Not exactly ideal when you need to stare at a screen for 14 hours a day. I've since been properly diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and ADHD, and things are somewhat under control now. But my career is still in shambles. I've been unemployed for 8 months. My loan repayments are around $6,000 a month. I kept investing. And I can't really survive on anything less than a $200,000 salary. On top of that, I married someone I shouldn't have, a decision I never would have made under normal circumstances. But we have a wonderful child together, and I'm holding on for their sake. I don't want to lose custody. So here I am, sober, aware, and completely chained to the consequences of my own decisions. Story 10. My best friend. She was a child prodigy, straight A student, fluent in 5 languages, played several instruments, and got accepted into multiple elite universities. By 25, she had completed her PhD in mathematics and had become an international rising star in her field. Her thesis made a groundbreaking connection between classical physics and quantum physics. She chose to work in academia, and for several years, top universities all over the world were competing to hire her. She worked at 4 international universities over the span of about 5 years. But during that time, she began to slip into psychosis, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. At the beginning, I thought she was just going through some kind of spiritual awakening. Then it turned into paranoia. Eventually, it was undeniable that she was seriously ill. She became convinced that everything happening around her was part of a massive conspiracy against her. Her behavior grew more erratic and aggressive. She started attacking her colleagues, first online, then verbally, and finally, physically. Because of her incredible reputation, she still managed to get rehired several times, even after being forcefully removed from multiple campuses. But after her 4th eviction, no one wanted to take the risk anymore. She ended up homeless, suffering from full-blown schizophrenia, and unable to communicate coherently. I tried to help her, but she eventually cut me off, just like she did with everyone else. After about 5 years of living like that, she was arrested and forcibly medicated. That was a year ago. Now, she's somewhat stable again. She helps tutor math students and lives a relatively normal life. But her mind isn't what it used to be. Unless she somehow makes another major breakthrough, it's unlikely she'll ever be able to return to academia after everything that happened. Story 11. Someone broke into my apartment and assaulted me at knife point. 2 years later, I moved into a new place, and my landlord illegally entered my unit, which triggered the trauma from that original break-in. I didn't even realize I had PTSD, but I did, and it eventually developed into a full-blown psychotic episode that lasted 2 years. I heard 8 to 10 distinct voices in my head, 24/7, insulting and threatening me. I genuinely believed I was going to be killed. I bought surveillance cameras, installed extra locks on every door, and slept with a knife under my pillow and a hammer on my nightstand. The paranoia and delusions got worse. I started believing the voices, that the threats were real. Once, the voices told me my landlord had broken in and assaulted me again, so I called the police. That incident got me admitted to a psychiatric ward over Thanksgiving. I lied to get out because I had to testify in court about the assault. I testified while still hearing voices. The case dragged on for 3 years, and I spent 2 of those years in psychosis. In the end, the man was convicted and sent to prison. Before the police even agreed to investigate, they demanded access to my private photos and social media passwords, which was humiliating and completely inappropriate. I had to comply just to get them to take the case. My private photos were even submitted as evidence by the defense during the trial. Before the psychosis started, I'd been seeing someone, but after I began to lose touch with reality, they slowly pulled away. During those 2 years, I barely left my bed. It felt like solitary confinement, except there was a loudspeaker in my head hurling insults at me nonstop. As for how my life changed, I'll probably never have a child, something I've wanted my entire life. The court case and psychosis consumed the years when that might have been possible. I gained 65 pounds from the antipsychotic medication and racked up massive credit card debt because I couldn't work for 2 years. My life isn't over, but it's permanently altered by someone else's violence and by everything that came after. Story 12. In my country, university is basically free, but getting into a good one is extremely competitive. Every year, the government holds one national exam, and if you want a good future, you have to score well on it. I tried 3 times before finally getting accepted into a good university. But soon after that, my health started to decline, both physically and mentally. When I began college, I developed a strange pain in my leg. At first, I didn't think much of it, but it didn't go away. When I finally went to the doctor, I learned I had a severe herniated disc, likely caused by my bad posture during the long hours of studying for the exam. The doctors didn't want to operate because of my age, so I had to learn to live with the pain. Then, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit my hometown, and everything changed. Thankfully, my entire family survived, but our apartment partially collapsed. That first night, I had to sleep in the car, and when I woke up, I felt a completely different kind of pain in another part of my leg. That new pain never responded to medication or treatment. I suffered from that nerve pain 24/7 for an entire year, and it completely drained the joy from my life. At that point, I was in my 3rd year of university, and my exams were tougher than ever. My GPA dropped sharply. I started taking antidepressants, gained a lot of weight, and had to give up being the captain of my robotics team, which competed nationally. I even landed one of the best internships that summer, but couldn't continue because of the pain, and I couldn't bring myself to explain the real reason why. I cried almost every day. I spent hours reading every article, study, and forum post I could find, trying to understand the source of my pain. I reached out to others who suffered from similar conditions, hoping it would make me feel less alone, maybe even help me find someone who had found a cure. But instead, I found people whose conditions were even worse than mine, and that realization terrified me. I began to lose hope and started having dark thoughts. Then, one day while stretching, something suddenly changed. The pain shifted, the pattern, the intensity, and somehow, it became more manageable. Since then, things have slowly improved. Story 13. My cousin. She was the valedictorian of her high school, smart, beautiful, and even dabbling in modeling. She had just turned 18. That same year, her father, my uncle, passed away from Lou Gehrig's disease. We were all there in his living room when he took his last breath. She was a total daddy's girl, and for good reason. He was a wonderful man and an even better father. I still believe that if he hadn't died, her life wouldn't have gone the way it did. Not long after his death, she started dating an older guy. None of us liked him, but since we all lived in different states, there wasn't much we could do. Her mother was completely grief-stricken and barely getting out of bed, so she couldn't intervene either. One night, while my cousin was working as a manager at a family-owned pizza restaurant, an armed robbery took place. She was held at gunpoint and forced to open the safe and hand over the cash. 2 days later, the truth came out. The robbery had been staged. The robber was her boyfriend. The police identified him from the security footage. Even though he wore a mask inside, he was dumb enough to drive his own car. They tracked him down through his license plate. When he was arrested, this 26-year-old man immediately turned on my cousin. He testified that she was the mastermind behind the robbery. He took a plea deal, got a lighter sentence, and only spent 6 months in jail. She, on the other hand, had the book thrown at her, 7 years in prison, of which she served 3. When she got out, she wasn't the same person anymore. Along with the trauma and survival habits she picked up in prison, she also came out addicted to drugs. Since then, she's been in and out of prison over and over, arrested for possession, distribution, prostitution, grand theft auto, burglary, robbery, you name it. She's never had a stable relationship, never had children, never held a real job as an adult. I still love her deeply. I always will, but we're both in our 40s now, and I've lost hope that she'll ever be able to turn her life around. Story 14. I used to have a good amount of money and solid prospects, but I made so many bad choices that I ended up ruining everything. I had a decent savings, enough to buy a new house, and I was on track to build a good life for myself. Then my mother passed away. I'd spent years taking care of her while she was sick, and after she died, I was broken. Out of loneliness, I called an ex. We ended up getting snowed in together, and before I knew it, she had moved in with me. I bought what I thought was a nice house, and we started living there together. Her family borrowed a large sum of money from me. I was stupid enough to trust them. Even though I had a written contract, they stole it and burned it. Not long after, she became emotionally and physically abusive. Then she got very sick, and I ended up taking care of her while still working a demanding 12-hour-a-day job. My health began to collapse. I was barely getting 4 hours of sleep a night, and she refused to follow her doctor's instructions, which only made things worse. I stayed with her, even after she cut off all affection, because she was sick and completely dependent on me. I even turned down people who genuinely wanted to be with me because I felt responsible for her. At one point, her father, who had become homeless, moved in too. I told him he could use the upstairs as long as he didn't smoke, since I'm allergic to nicotine. But he smoked constantly, leaving the place covered in trash and piles of cigarette butts. The air was so bad that trying to clean for even 5 minutes nearly sent me to the hospital. All the while, she was still abusive, throwing knives, hammers, anything heavy she could find. She even threatened to burn my house down with my cat still inside because I couldn't bring her the car to confront a pregnant woman who had argued with her on Facebook. I was taking her to doctor's appointments at 4 a.m. 3 times a week, driving her back home during my lunch breaks, and working from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. most nights. Then she started cheating on me while I was at work, and took the car I had paid off. Meanwhile, I was bleeding money. Her medical bills, her expensive food, her pets, which she never got fixed and which destroyed parts of my home. Eventually, the house began to fall apart. Electrical problems caused multiple fires, and during the winter, I was left without heat, light, or hot water. That's when she finally left. Now I live alone, in constant pain and depression. My job pays decently, but they expect me to do the work of 3 people and constantly threaten to fire us if we can't keep up. I've had days where my legs wouldn't support my weight, and I had to use a cart just to stand while working. I wasn't allowed to leave without being threatened with termination, or even criminal charges for abandonment. Someone else came into my life for a while, but it was just more disappointment. She kept asking for money, and when I couldn't give her more, she said her therapist told her to focus on herself. 2 weeks later, she had a new boyfriend and moved in with him. In all that time, the only physical affection I got was a single kiss, after nearly a decade without even a hug. Now I'm showing signs of possible skin cancer and early heart failure, but with my debt, lack of insurance coverage, and the depression, I haven't been able to properly see a doctor. I started my adult life with close to $100,000 saved, an 800+ credit score, a degree, and friends I thought I could count on. Now I'm buried in debt. My credit score is under 300 because of someone else's medical bills, and I'm just trying to survive one day at a time. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.